Hi, and welcome to the Core Report Special Edition. The question that we're asking today is how can industry-academic partnerships accelerate India's transition to a knowledge-based economy, which is also the title of a paper on the subject authored by Vipin Sondhi, Rajendra Srivastava, Rohit Bansal, and Shivam Srivastava. So I'm going to come to all of that in a bit, but my guests to do that today are Professor M Jagadesh Kumar and Professor Raj Srivastava, who are both joining me here. Professor Kumar is an academician, administrator, and author, used to be chairman until very recently of the University Grants Commission and also professor of electrical engineering at IIT Delhi and also former Vice-Chancellor of JNU New Delhi. Professor Rajendra or Raj Srivastava is the former Dean of the Indian School of Business and the Novartis Professor of Marketing Strategy and Innovation. So thank you both for joining me. I know that you both are going to take slightly different approaches to the theme, but the larger question, like I said, is how do we accelerate? But before we come to the acceleration part, maybe we can do a quick, status check on where do we stand today when we compare ourselves with maybe global peers in terms of industry academia collaboration, both in terms of the number and scale and also in terms of the complexity and the sophistication of the work that's going on, which obviously could or ought to lead to outcomes that are desirable for industrial growth and economic growth. So, Professor Kumar, would you like to start first?
Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. If you look at the R&D investment in our country during the last 10 years or so, it grew from 60,000 crores to nearly about 127,000 crores of R&D investment in our country. And there are in our country pockets of high corporate intensity and world-class public institution and industry collaborations. And if you look at, I will take a few examples of, let's say, in automobiles. If you look at the kind of R&D investment the Tata Motors is doing, it's nearly about 6 to 7% of their total revenue. And similarly, another important area, pharmaceuticals. Sun Pharma has invested about 6.5 to 6.7% of their global revenues in R&D. If you look at the defense sector, which is very important for our country, Bharat Electronics has allocated 6% of their turnover on R&D. Communications are growing very rapidly in our country, and the communication equipment manufacturing is happening in our country. Tejas Networks, they have spent a huge share of their revenue on R&D. So now, if you look at some of these examples, there is increased spending on R&D because our industry recognizes that new innovations and new technologies are possible only when they allocate a significant amount of their revenues towards R&D. And when you look at the educational institutions, there are increased collaborations between academia and industry. One important example that comes to my mind is IIT Madras Research Park. And this research park hosts more than 200 companies in close proximity to very active faculty and the student teams. And there is a daily flow of ideas and talent between industries and the academic institutions. The Ministry of Defense, for example, nurtures startup and lab teaming through the IDEX scheme. And there are DRDO centers of excellence which embed joint research along with the campuses. So we can cite many such examples of how there is increased interest and collaboration between industry and academia. But what is the challenge for us is scaling up these collaborations so that there is a significant change that we see in terms of the technological innovations that are happening. And I will add some more to this discussion as we progress.
Got it. Professor Srivastava, over to you.
Well, I would like to add slightly different perspective. I think, yes, we've got good examples of companies that are beginning to invest in R&D. But by and large, R&D investment in India is very, very low. But the second perspective that I bring to the table is taking the idea from the lab into the market, which is an entirely different kind of a story. And that's a problem not only in India, it's a problem elsewhere. If I go to the US, you've got the National Science Foundation and things like that that are funding research and engineering and science schools. And then at some point in time, science gets converted, let me just call it technology, think of it as applied science, with technology being applied science. And then the technology needs to gets converted into product markets. So the responsibility for investment starts shifting from government funding, government-supported funding, to corporate funding. And then towards the end, it is mostly corporate funding. Now, in my experience, the incentive systems are not aligned. This is many years ago, maybe 30 years ago. I was at an institute called IC Square Institute in Austin, Texas. And we ran the Austin Technology Incubator. And we got permission from the government to commercialize NASA technology. When we went to Houston, to NASA in Houston and in California, we found that NASA scientists were being compensated, or their incentive systems were based on publishing papers and getting patents, but not commercializing them. So if I fast forward 25 years after that, I was working with Dr. Girish Sani at CSIR. And so we have 38 national labs at that time, and they were the scientists at the national labs were also being incentivized to do research, but there was no incentive to take that research and convert it into commercial products. And I think we need to do both. And I'm really glad that Professor Jagadish pointed out IIT Madras. IIT Madras is trying to bridge that gap. They're doing the tech development, but they're also working very hard, I think, in trying to take those innovations to the marketplace. And I think when it comes to Indian industry, our focus is so much on EBITDA, which is looking at producing, profits yesterday, that in order to produce EBITDA, what you do is like the salary for scientists is an expense. And therefore, if you want to improve EBITDA, what you do is you cut back on tech development, and you also cut back on market development. So many times you get ideas that may be coming out of India, but they may be commercialized elsewhere. So if I take, Kirloskar Cummins, the designs were coming out of India, but the manufacturing was being done in China. And so we need to be a little bit careful about how we look at the R&D cycles. It should include the lab development. It should also include go-to-market.
Okay, so Professor Kumar, can I come back to you on this? So you're linking R&D spend directly with academia, and the academia-industry collaboration. You feel that the two are inextricably linked or somewhat linked?
Well, they are very closely linked. If you look at the global examples, many industries, they have co-established the labs, research labs, along with the university. IMEC Belgium is a great example. So where the facilities run 24 hours, the researchers of IMEC from the universities, they use the facilities, and also the industry uses. So this co-developing of facilities is one area on which I think our country has to focus. But in addition to that, I think we also need to set certain targets, because a clear benchmark on how much the industry should be prepared to spend, it provides a kind of roadmap for us. If you look at the NSF data from US, there is something like 5% R&D to sales ratio for R&D investment among the US firms in US. Can India also aim for sector-specific targets for investment, which can climb year by year? And then they can balance it with their export goals and the cash flow realities and so on. And then there should also be some kind of rewards for co-funded projects and shared facilities. And the ANRF, which has been established recently, from last year onwards, it has become functional. There are many schemes that ANRF is launching, and they have already launched some of them, such as the partnerships for accelerated innovation and research, where the industry has to spend 50% of the total cost of the project. And similarly, you have the convergence research centers of excellence, where the industry has to spend some amount of funding. So there are examples within the government, and also there are examples within the industry of coming together. So ultimately, I think just as it happened globally, an efficient, a win-win collaboration between industry and the academia is the best solution for a country like ours.
Right, and I saw your piece where you talked about bringing global education home. So I can see that you're linking this going forward on a more cross-border basis as well. But we'll come to that in a bit. Professor Srivastava, so when we, so there are collaborations. It's not that there are not. I mean, the paper that we just talked about earlier or referred to talks about like companies like Bosch or Boeing, Forbes Marshall, among many others who have collaborated with different institutions across India and for very specific purposes. It could be aerospace, it could be to do with engines. Now, my question is, what's the kind of scale that we should be looking at? Because it's obviously happening. There is some benefit being derived from it, but it's not enough.
The scale is not there, but let me dive a little bit deeper into this collaboration that Professor Jagadesh was talking about. This is almost a decade ago when I was at Singapore Management University. I was doing, SMU was doing some work with SAP labs in Germany. And so they invited me to come to Germany. And from Germany, we went to Switzerland and a couple of places. So, for example, at the University of St. Gallen, there was a SAP lab. And SAP was paying for 2 faculty members. They were paying for, I think, 4 or 5 doctoral students. And they were paying for the equipment that would be used in those labs. And so it isn't surprising then that the work that lab was doing was co-aligned with the work that SAP needed in their output. I saw similar kind of setups in between academia and industry in the automotive sector in Stuttgart. So when you have industry and academics working together, it tends to accelerate the level of collaboration. And so now if we can say, how do we scale that up? There have to be some incentives, for that to happen, and the government needs to provide a little bit of architecture around it. So let me give you an example from another country, which is Singapore. Singapore had, the government had, of course, the NUS and NTU, but there's also something called A-STAR, which is Agency for Science, Technology and Research. And A-STAR, this is now a decade ago, had 1,400 PhDs within A-STAR. And so then when the issue becomes, does let's say, Singapore want the pharmaceutical industry to move into Singapore? It's not only making real estate, etc., available to that industry and fast forwarding, the paperwork related to that industry, but also being able to provide the research and the technology capital that is available to back up that industry. Now we have a lot of talent in India, and we're beginning to see these clusters emerge. So we have a cluster, for example, in the automotive sector that has emerged in Pune. There's a cluster that is in Chennai. There's a cluster that is emerging in Gurgaon. And what we need to do is we need to combine the R&D and take it into commercial enterprise because it's the commercial enterprise that will start pumping the money back. And I'm beginning to see this in the automotive sector. Bharat Forge has made some decent movements in the supply chain. And I was talking with some people in the automotive sector, and it looks like that India is beginning to produce major components, but even finished products for the German markets and so on. So when we are able to move that science and technology into the markets, that's when the cash flow starts. And this is where the Chinese have been very good in trying to get the scientists and the engineers back from the US. They call it, I think, 1,000 Turtles program. But this was an incentive for the people to come back. And I think it's more like 30,000 turtles and not 1,000 turtles. So we need to look at incentives for scaling up. And the incentives for scaling up is when we start looking at the future as opposed to past performance. And I'm sort of going around, but too much focus on EBITDA by Indian companies is preventing a focus on investment in R&D.
Right. I know. I know this is this is a issue that's debated quite a lot. Professor Kumar, you talked about Sun Pharma and 6 to 7% of R&D investment. The corresponding figure, I think, for a large multinational like Pfizer or Eli Lilly would be 25% plus, if I'm not mistaken. So the gap is huge. Anyway, but that's a slightly different discussion. So I think we're talking about what we can do with this or what we have. So if we were to, so at this point of time, if we were to say that we need to see more collaborations, where should the biggest push come from? I mean, Professor Srivastava says that, okay, it's the government saying that, listen, not only am I encouraging this, but I'm also giving you land because we want to operationalize this or commercialize this. So is our sort of architecture, to use the same words, structured in the right way? And then we can come to whether it's being funded effectively or not.
Let me share a few thoughts on developing a practical agenda, both for the firms, the companies, and the educational institutions. The beginning point to this practical agenda is that the enterprises, the industries, they should commit to rising R&D to sales path. The investment in R&D is increasingly becoming important if they have to survive in this competitive world. So therefore, they should set multi-year targets. They should disclose the progress of their investment in R&D and tie the leadership bonuses to sustained intensity of this investment. So this is the beginning point. And then industry also have to co-create with the academic campuses. They should join or send they should seed multi-university centers around a portfolio of problems rather than isolated projects. They should use shared IP frameworks that reward both publication as well as the commercialization together. And that is where the issue of developing shared goals becomes important. And then industry has to invest in the shared tools, equipment. As I mentioned, the IMEC in Belgium or SRC in USA, those models clearly show that when you have shared infrastructure, it crowds the private investment. It attracts more private investment. So they should contribute to test beds. They should contribute to pilot lines, data sets that others can use, the academicians can use. And the other important point is they should hire for research careers in India. We should demonstrate that research careers are also important. They should bring more PhDs into product groups, create dual track roles with adjunct appointments. For example, UGC has introduced the professor of practice positions now. You can also sponsor doctoral cohorts aligned with the company roadmaps. So there are many things. And another important thing is we need to attract more younger people into research careers. And that is possible only when we tell the success stories. and a large number of students, they come from rural background, and nearly 60% of our colleges are located in rural areas. So therefore, the industry academia collaborations have to be told in Indian languages, in practitioner friendly formats, so that it builds prestige around research careers and attracts a lot of talent into the industry to work on the R&D. So I think there are many things that we need to do, and one important thing that we need to do is both industry and academia have to develop trust in each other, and that is possible only when they develop proper chemistry between them, and that can happen if the universities can send their faculty to go and spend some time and build those relationships with the industry people. And similarly, industry experts had to come to the universities and the good research institutes and spend time, build these ties, so that can ultimately lead to better collaborations.
Right. So, Professor Srivastava, one of the, in the paper, amongst the challenges listed for, improving industry academia collaboration, one is the objectives are different for industry and academia. Obviously, universities are focused on learning and research. Industries want to commercialize and take product to market, which is what you've talked about. So that's one part, and which means also timeframes are different and so on. The second is, again, linking to what Professor Kumar said, is that the cultural differences between the two worlds. Now, all of this has been addressed by other countries, so academia, industry collaborations elsewhere. What are the learnings?
Well, I think when we say they've been addressed by other countries, I'll say they've been addressed by a small minority of countries. Germany happens to be one of them, where they are closely linking, the apprenticeship program, with the goals of the company, and so Fraunhofer Institute, etc., sort of, based on that foundation. And so certainly we can learn from the German way of thinking and incorporate that in. And indeed, it's already being done. HCL, for example, relies a lot on experiential learning. And, these are ideas that we should build on. Academics go on a sabbatical to other universities. There's no reason why academics cannot go and spend time at a Mahindra automotive lab or SAP labs in Bangalore or wherever. So, we in academia need to start looking for opportunities where we can actually work with industry. But to do that, the institutions need to legitimize that. And so which kind of brings into play the applied research. Now, what I learned, this is in the earlier part of my career. I spent my first 25 years in the US before I stepped back into Asia, is that I found a great deal of collaboration, going on in terms of experiential learning. And so internship programs are absolutely needed. When I was in Singapore Management University and Singapore University of Technology and Design, that was a new engineering school that was set up in collaboration with MIT. What we did, SMU and SETD, put together a joint program in engineering and management, where at the end of 4 years, very intense 4 years, you got 2 degrees, a management degree and an engineering degree. But the beauty of it was that each of these degrees required an internship. So you worked with an engineering company and you also worked on the management side. And it is this internship that brought the students into the companies. Now in academia, I can't call it a faculty internship, so I call it a corporate immersion. You go and work for the headquarters, you work for its chief executive's office or the head of engineering design. Like, tomorrow I'll be headed out to a company and I'm really talking to the innovation part of the company to see how we can collaborate. So this transition needs to take place where we begin to work together. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that we need to look at the value chain. So when Professor Jagadesh was kind enough to be at ISB, we were talking about the semiconductor industry. And so, yes, we need the semiconductor manufacturing. So we have a value chain. We have Applied Materials or Lam Research, and they are providing the equipment that makes semiconductors. Then Intel and TSMC are using that equipment to produce the semiconductors. But the semiconductors go into phones, they go into MRI machines, they go into automotive, they go into computers. So in order for the semiconductor industry to flourish, we need to find home for those semiconductors. So which means the ecosystem now needs to develop. So we need to start looking at the entire value chain when we start looking at collaboration. So not just collaboration at the semiconductor level, but the collaboration and the design of automotives, because those are the ones that are using semiconductors.
Right. And you touched on internships. Professor Kumar, let me come back to you. And I think it's useful even for those who are listening or watching to maybe understand what we've been doing in the context of internships, maybe beginning with the new education policy, and how we are using, or let's say maybe accelerating the importance and the use of internships in the education stroke vocational system. So, I mean, essentially what I'm asking you to do is walk us through where we are today versus maybe where we started a few years ago.
So during last couple of years, following the vision document of NEP 2020 that we have introduced many reforms by providing flexible frameworks to the universities to introduce more experiential learning as part of the degree programs. Now, the experiential learning comes when the students go out of their campuses and interact with the enterprises across the sectors. That is one way of introducing the experiential learning. And the other way is to run some joint programs with the industry, which we call as apprenticeship-embedded degree programs. As part of this, now we are telling the universities that you identify the industries which are located around your place and find out what kind of skilled workforce they require, and you co-design the program so that the theory part can be imparted to the students in the university for 2 years. And the next 2 years, the students can spend their time in the industry, and on the floor experience, on the job experience can be gained. So this becomes a win-win situation. That is one part. But what is required for us is to bridge the gap between the skills that are required by the industry and the skills that we are providing in the university education system. So this gap has to be bridged, and that is possible only when industry and the university system works together. And at a higher level, when we want to put our students in product development and innovation and so on, R&D becomes an important aspect. And R&D thrives only when companies and enterprises and the campuses solve real problems together. And India can draw strength from its knowledge traditions that it has over a long period, and from a young and ambitious talent base that we have. So I would like to mention two things. One, for the industry, the task before the industry is very clear. You spend more in R&D, collaborate better with the academia, and make the university a co-architect of your strategy. And the task before the universities is equally clear. You organize yourself for better impact, better collaboration with the industry. You welcome the industry questions and then measure the results. So in order to make this a possibility, UGC also has come up with the a draft regulation to encourage faculty members to spend more time instead of writing papers in journals, to encourage them to spend in technology development, in establishing startup companies, to recognize those activities also for the selection of faculty members and the promotion from assistant professor to the higher levels. So we are bringing a lot of reforms in higher education so that both the students will be encouraged to participate in industry and the faculty will be encouraged and their efforts will be recognized for collaborating with the industry.
Right. Okay. Professor Srivastava, so, Professor Kumar talked about the portfolio of problems. I mean, if we were to, sort of keep starting or rather working our way down from the top, what's the accelerated approach? Is it identifying a portfolio of problems and then saying, okay, here's where industry and academia can collaborate and push that whole thing or give it a strong push in each of those areas? Or is there some other approach which is more maybe ground up or a combination of both?
I think it's a co-development of ideas. I think that the structure should be there for that interaction to take place. And so just as we have positions for visiting faculty coming in from other schools, we should also have executive in residence programs. So somebody from Microsoft could, spend a couple of months, maybe 2 weeks here, 6 weeks there. They can spend a couple of months, working with the academic colleagues, just as academic colleagues could be going and spending, a couple of months at a company such as Microsoft or Mahindra and Mahindra, whatever it may be.
So,
working
the reason you mentioned, Professor Srivastava, if I can interrupt you, so you mentioned the Mahindra example. I mean, not to pin that company down, but you're saying that this does not happen, or there is something stopping it from happening?
No. When it happens, the payoffs are huge, because what happens is the projects get co-developed, and they get fast scaled, and then when you combine it with student internships, it leads to a further scaling up. See, what happens is that if a student is working on a project, there's experiential learning, and the faculty members also engaged with the industry, and then the student goes on an further internship in the summer for 2 or 3 months, and they do a couple of internships. I can guarantee you that this program, where they're blended in theory and practice, is going to turn out individuals that the companies will snap up like that. So you get the students placed at a higher salary, and that then starts driving more and more people, towards that opportunity. So it becomes a self-feeding, kind of mechanism.
But you're saying that academia should also be spending time in corporations or businesses, right?
Absolutely.
Not excluded. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that, and I've been since the late 80s. I've been when they made the mistake of appointing me department chair at the University of Texas. I started pushing my junior colleagues to go to 3M, to go to Motorola, to go in Procter & Gamble, and kind of work with senior management there. And we coined a phrase to start working on problems that were worth solving. So rather than just work on any problems, because you're working with the head of these organizations. So if you, I'll give you another example. This was at Texas Instruments. A group of students were working on what we call the issue-based learning program. So the issue that they were facing is, at that time, TI had 22 fabrication plants, and it was not possible to produce the same chip in all the plants. So the question was, what were the engineering changes that were needed in order to be able to produce the same chip everywhere? And that would then really facilitate your supply chain logistics and so on. So this was part of a project for an MBA program. And this particular project paid off about $4 million per year savings to Texas Instruments. And so this is an example of how $4 million a year for a 10-year period, you do the discounted cash flow analysis. So TI funded a group of MBA students, and what they got is $40 million back in return. So when this starts happening, when the IIT, see, India has two great brands, IITs and IIMs. You combine them, and we are providing the metaphors around the world. And if IITs and IIMs can combine together and do in India what we're doing globally, just imagine what's going to happen out here.
But Professor Raj, I would like to add, although I come from the IIT system, there is a huge talent pool across the university system, because IITs are centrally funded institutions. In all the centrally funded institutions, we have only about 6 to 7% of the total number of students in higher education. The remaining 94% of the students and faculty are in the university system. So therefore, we also need to strengthen the research ecosystem in the universities. And this is where, Professor Raj, I would like to add 2 points. One, in the university system, the industry should support campus programs to train the faculty and PhD scholars to work with the industry. Many of them, they do not know how to negotiate IP with the industry. They need to be trained in doing translational projects. So there is a lot that needs to be done, but there is a huge talent there. And one more point I would like to add is that as an incentive for the industry, I think all the listed companies should be asked to report their R&D spend, the share of spend that flows to Indian higher educational institutions and labs. So this act of disclosure, it may nudge the boards to treat research as a strategic, not incidental, not as something, a routine activity.
So, Professor, I agree 200% with your observation that for every IIT graduate, we have 20 other graduates. So I agree with you entirely on that. And I also think that the faculty, we can't expect the faculty to just turn around in a day. We also need to come up with faculty development programs in terms of how to do this, how to collaborate with industry. And what I have found over the years is that, I'll give you an extreme example. This was at Emory University, and these were 3 faculty members. They were working on a project that got patented, and then one of the pharmaceutical companies bought that patent for $500 million. Okay, $500 million. So the university kept 250, and the remaining 250 was split between the 3 faculty members. So now with these 3 faculty members having $80 million each, I can tell you they were rock stars. And that then started sparking the culture of, how to, why academics should really be working on projects that result in patents that are commercializable. And so this, I think the new education policy has all the right policy objectives, but what it hasn't pointed out is how to do it. And that kind of leaves it up to people like you and me who are old enough, and also to gather people from industry to figure out how do we actually run, maybe 2-week programs for faculty and along with people from industry to enable this collaboration and to accelerate this transition. Otherwise, things are not going to happen on their own. So thank you for pointing it out, because the talent from India, let's just say it's not just IITs, it's really human capital. It's whether it is in engineering or it is elsewhere, we have a lot of talent that we need to invest in. And so I like to point out one thing: when we say labor cost, then what comes to people's mind is how do I reduce that cost? When we say human capital, which is what we're trying to do with education, then the focus shifts on how do we nurture it. So if we start moving away from cost to capital, that would be a good movement in education.
Right. Okay. We are to sum up now. So as we're running out of time. So, in terms of recommendations, to enhance industry academia partnerships. So one is, of course, more government expenditure in R&D. The second is more energy in private-public partnerships, building innovation ecosystems and promoting international partnerships, something that Professor Kumar referred to right in the beginning as well. So if I can get a sense of the one thing that you would focus more on at this point to achieve greater scale in everything that we've talked about, what would that be, and how could we direct our energy there? Professor Kumar, it's over to you, and then I'll come to you, Professor Srivastava.
Right. Very briefly, I think in the next 5 years, let us target to see that the corporate participation in gross expenditure in R&D doubles, and then the number of long horizon industry university centers in strategic fields are also double. Let us keep this as a target. I'm saying this because of the progress that we made during last 10 years. So therefore, in the next 5 years, we should be able to achieve more. So few sectors come to my mind. Auto and pharmaceuticals, they can sustain global grade intensity. We are also competitive in those areas. And telecom equipment and power electronics, they can develop stronger export pipelines. And defense electronics is also an important area. It can move from designs from lab to a line. It can productize the ideas. And then we have the energy companies. Their work can lead to breakthroughs in green hydrogen and circular chemistry. So I think the goal that we are putting for ourselves as a country, they can be realized only when we are committing ourselves in a credible manner, and it cannot be realized just through wishful thinking. So therefore, both the academia as well as the industry had to take their first step forward. And you see, globally, if you see, it is not the government funding which is causing the R&D to progress at a rapid pace. It is the industry investment in R&D. So therefore, industry in the country, although in certain sectors they are spending, more industry spending is called for if we want to be a technologically leading country in the globe.
Right. Thank you, Professor Kumar. Professor Srivastava, last word. So we've talked about the challenges or the key challenges. Intellectual property I didn't mention, but Professor Kumar, you did. We've now talked about what is the actionable prescriptions that we should be looking at if we want to accelerate the pace of industry-academia collaboration or partnership.
So, again, I think I agree with everything that Professor Jagadesh said. It's just as the moving from science to technology into the market, we will have to get to be more and more what I would call multidisciplinary. And because we need to start move from narrow thinking into having an impact. So, in addition to the areas that Professor talked about, I would like to, for example, include healthcare. We have the technology, we have the human capital. Let's get them to work together. And also look at the intersection between the industries. So what has made the India stack move forward, why India is a leader in fintech, is because of not only the fintech side, but because of telecom. And if Jio and Bharti had not been there, we would not have had the kind of impact that we've had. But the other thing I would like to emphasize is that in order to grow the market, of course, the Indian market is big enough. But for India to be successful and competitive globally, we need to be able to compete worldwide. But in the short run, I don't think the large companies in North America are going to roll over and play dead. Or that Europeans are going to say, hey, why don't you come and take over Brussels? So what we have learned, let's say, with the India stack and the telecom duopoly, if I might call it that, is can we take that kind of thinking into the global south? Can we help Nigeria? Can we help Indonesia? And I think the answer is yes. Professor Jagadesh was talking about Sun Pharma. Then Sun Pharma has started expanding into the global south. So we need to have, integrate the business mindset along with the technology mindset. And we need to look for multidisciplinary ways of thinking, not only just engineering and management, but look at design, the impact of design. When we think of, some of the German companies, what comes to our mind is the design element of it. So you combine technology management and you throw in design, and then you throw in public policy like we're talking about. The integration of all of these under one roof is what is going to help us drive. In addition to Professor Jagdish, I will say multidisciplinarity. And beyond that, I would say the active support of clusters. We cannot be spread, when, we can't, if you can't water everything, you got to choose where we water. And I think we need to start watering the success in pharmaceuticals. And that happens to be in cities like Pune and Hyderabad. We need to support, automotive, and that happens to include Chennai and Gurgaon also. So let's look at clusters that can be sustained, because India is too big to support all across the board. But obviously, we have to make sure that every region gets something.
Right, and I'm going to supplement that question with in a second for both of you. But I don't know. I don't know whether what you feel, but and you can or cannot respond. I mean, I also feel the importance or the need for champions. We talked about IIT Madras quite a bit. I was there about 2 years ago, doing a small panel discussion on or around climate tech. And, so you had Professor Junjunwala's, I mean, he has a long shadow over the whole institution, and he's a evangelist, he's a champion. I mean, he's not there now, and he's retired. But what I mean is, I think the importance of that individual is also something to think about. But I mean, like I said, you may or may not respond to that. But the supplemental question is this, first to you, Professor Kumar. What's the example that you would hold up in terms of, you say, okay, I went to, let's say, IIT Madras or maybe in IIT Delhi, your alma mater, and say, here is an example that, let's say, a business, companies or CEOs should visit to understand what this can really do in order in a way that it can transform your business or, provide new talent. So what's the one example that basically you should or people should look for? First to you, Professor Kumar, and then to Professor Srivastava, from what you've seen around you.
Since I come from the semiconductor design and manufacturing area, in which I have worked for several decades, I think many of the IITs, such as IIT Bombay, IISc, IIT Madras, IIT Kanpur, some of these established IITs, they are doing exceedingly well in semiconductor technology.
Okay.
And considering the fact that Government of India, through its semiconductor mission, it's giving so much of importance to semiconductors in our country, I think this is one sector where our industries have to come forward, interact more with our faculty and students in these IITs, look at their capabilities. We have enormous design capabilities and basic research capabilities, and they need to be used to turn them into products. Because today our country is spending huge amounts in establishing the fab facilities. And once those fab facilities come, if our industry and academia can develop the designs, and they can be realized on silicon chip. So I think there is a huge opportunity in semiconductor design and manufacturing area for our industries to benefit from the excellence that already exists in our IIT system.
Got it. And Professor Srivastava, what's the one example that you would hold up?
Caught me flat-footed on this one because I was coming at it from a management viewpoint.
Sure.
And so you asked me for an academic example. How about if I give you a business example?
Sure.
Okay. So you take a company like Indigo, you take a company like Mahindra and Mahindra. They made big progress in the last few years. I would point out, look at Indigo in particular. They took a deep breath and made a huge capital investment. But you don't acquire all these planes and so on unless you know how to use them. So they've had to invest in human capital. At the same time, they've had to invest in analytics, in AI and so on, in order to figure out how to better utilize people and how to better utilize the planes that they have efficiently and effectively. And most people don't realize it, that depending on the day, Indigo is, or Interglobe is the number 2 or number 3, depending on the day, number 2 airline in market capitalization in the world. It is the 7th largest in terms of passenger traffic right now. But it is growing so rapidly that its market value is number 2 in the world. And so we need to look at how these solutions are put together. It's being able to weave in human capital. They've got a tremendous training program for the cabin crew. They've got a training program for people who are working in the analytics. And I look at them as the sort of the Uber of the airline industry. And I made a comment along the lines of, what can a grandfather, meaning Southwest Airlines, learn from a grandson? The son would have been Ryanair, and the grandson would be Indigo. So what can the grandfather learn from a grandson? And so we should look at elements of success that we have in India. And healthcare is one area where we really need to look at. Now, I can't point an individual, but when I look at what Apollo Hospital has done, they've done a tremendous job.
Right, and we run out of time. Indigo is a good example because of collaboration, not in that sense, but you had Rakesh Gangwal, who came from the United States, partnered, and I guess he brought all the human capital, the insight, the ability to run a large airline and scale up. Of course, things haven't worked out between the founders, but that's a completely different story.
Rahul Bharti at one time was a teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful to speak with both of you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Govind. Professor Jagadesh, it's a pleasure as usual.
Thank you, sir.